Rishaad Yetsenga. Rishaad is head of global foreign exchange at ANZ in Sydney. So, Rishaad, they've done it before. It's not had any long-term effect. Why bother?
That's a very good question. It smacks of Japan playing to a primarily domestic audience. I think it's, as you intimate, it's quite clear that this hasn't worked before. They've even done it in ways which are quite persistent, and the volumes have been quite large, and it still hasn't had any sustained impact. So perhaps there's some effect in terms of changing the short-term positioning in the market, but really what you're doing, I think, is adding up these cases of unsuccessful intervention. Medium term, you just embolden the market and really, talk any people out of being short the yen.
Yeah, and, well, that's the hope and the expectation, I suppose, on their part. But, let's see if we talk a little bit about this. This is not really a strong yen story. It's a weak dollar story.
Look, it's absolutely a weak dollar story. I mean, in real terms, the yen is broadly in line with long-term averages. Japanese exports are flat year over year. Sure, it would be great if they were up, but certainly they're not down. There's nothing that says, the profits at the export-focused sectors are doing okay in Japan. There's nothing here which says, the yen is the problem for the Japanese economy. They seem to be much more structural drivers when you're talking about Japan, but yet they keep targeting the yen.
Yeah, well, let's talk about how this does work out. I mean, have you seen how the obviously you have, it's your job, but the dollar weakness story playing through across the whole gamut of the foreign exchange sphere, isn't it?
Look, I think the last couple of weeks have been important. Perhaps nearly the last month, where you've had this broad-based move towards a weaker dollar. I think it's taken people very much by surprise. Certainly no clients I've been speaking to the last few weeks have been expecting Europe to really solve its problems, and so not really expecting the dollar to weaken. And yet here we are, dollar yen at its lows, currencies like the Aussie and the euro within shooting distance of their recent highs, at least this year. I think this move is playing into the hands of people who've missed the trend to a weaker dollar. But this is going to be very short term. It's hard to see how Japan sustains the strength in the dollar that's resulting today. And so I think investors are going to need to really think, do they want to participate in this move or look for the dollar to weaken again?
Yeah, well, views on the whole Asia have been let's say, evolving of late. There's been more concerns of a slowdown here. Now tell us about that, and how does that play out with what you're seeing?
Well, look, I think an Asian slowdown is in the price. The two questions really are, does this slowdown become something quite sharp and quite deep, or is the slowdown finished and we start to head off into some sort of recovery? Now, this week we've got a bunch of numbers out, and I think globally the numbers in Asia are perhaps the most important, certainly in my view, even overshadowing non-farm payrolls in the US on Friday. If the PMI numbers in Asia can show some gradual recovery this week, particularly in the smaller economies like Singapore and Korea, then I think that suggests that if you're not positioned short the US dollar, you really need to make your mind up quickly.
Rishaad, just want to also get your views on last week's deal and the euro's move higher as well. It seems that, everybody out there, George Soros, people like that, saying that this is not something which is going to be a lasting agreement, and that the pressures still on the euro will be there, and especially in about 3 months' time onwards. And, well, $1.41 I think it's at again.
Look, I think I certainly can't find one piece of constructive analysis, one piece of analysis which is constructive on last week's agreement. The fact the euro is up here says to me there is something else going on. It's simply not, I think, conceivable that the market is just ignoring what's going on. And I think what's going on is, to use your phraseology, it's a weak dollar story. And I think what's happening in currency markets potentially starts to drive the fundamentals. We really typically think about currencies responding to the fundamentals, but I think with euro up here, Aussie up here, it's going to give central banks more room to ease domestic monetary policy, but you won't see that show up in exchange rates. I think the dollar stays very weak.
Rishaad, thanks for your time. Rishaad Yetsenga there from ANZ talking to us about that move that we just had from the Bank of Japan.